So welcome everybody to this first of the spring webinar series of Renewable Heat Now, the Renewable Heat Now campaign and the combined New York State Clean Heating and Cooling Communities, otherwise known as Heat Smart. This webinar series is also sponsored by Mothers Out Front and some other community partners and features several special guests, two of whom you'll meet tonight. My name's Lisa Marshall. I am the Heat Smart Tompkins Program Director. We serve Tompkins and Chemung counties. Chemung County is actually where I live, and I'm also on the state leadership team of Mothers Out Front that organizes around the state and community campaigns for a livable climate for all children. We're very happy to have you tonight to kick off this series on this wonderful, sunny, warm, at least where I was today, St. Patty's Day, with our two special guests. And I'm going to quickly share my screen and get the slides started. Please stay muted until we get to the Q&A portion, and then we can take your questions. So thanks again for being here. I'm going to share my screen now. Please don't judge the number of open tabs I have on my screen. Here, let's see, I'm gonna open the slides. Okay, there we go. And here we are. Why is it not showing what I need it to show? Here we go. Okay. Can you see my slides now? Great, thank you for the thumbs up. So as I said, this is the first in a webinar series of 6 really exciting webinars. We're going to have one every 2 weeks on a Thursday. And I hope that you will sign up for multiple webinars and tell your friends. This is, we're thinking about building electrification and heating and cooking without fossil fuels and how we're going to make that all work for all of New York State. As I said, this is sponsored in part by the Renewable Heat Now campaign. The Renewable Heat Now campaign is not an organization. It's a campaign made up of many organizations, including grassroots organizers, policy experts, lawyers, and industry partners who are all working together for a livable climate, and specifically to work on kicking fossil fuels out of all of our buildings. This series is also sponsored by the Renewable Heat Now campaign, by the New York's Clean Heating and Cooling Communities, otherwise often known as Heat Smart campaigns. And this map shows all of the Heat Smart campaigns around New York State. I'm very proud to be the program director of Heat Smart Tompkins, shown here in the dark blue. We serve Tompkins and Chemung counties, and some of the other Heat Smart directors are here. And if you want to meet with the Heat Smart director from your region, we can manage that at the end of the meeting. So why clean heating and cooling? Why is this important? Well, as you all probably are very well aware, we find ourselves in what some are calling the climate emergency, brought home to us very vividly in the last couple of weeks with the release of the new UN climate report, the IPCC report. But we're very fortunate to live in New York State that has passed a landmark climate law, the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, that requires our state to reduce emissions quite dramatically by 40% by 2030 and 85% by 2050. And so we have to look and see, where are those greenhouse gases coming from? And this graphic shows that they are mostly coming from transportation and the building sector. And actually this graphic is a little bit wrong. The building sector is now considered to be the biggest, bigger than transportation, because when this graphic was made, New York State didn't count the leaked methane from natural gas. But now we do count that. And so we know our buildings are actually the biggest sector. And if you are tuning in from New York City, it's actually 2/3 of the greenhouse gases in New York City or more are coming from your buildings. So it's a very important thing to figure out how to tackle. So then we have to think about how are we using energy in our homes. And this graphic shows that mostly, or more than half, is heating and air conditioning, and most of that is heating. And so that's why the clean heating and cooling campaigns tend to focus on heat. But appliances are also important, 15%. And many of us still can't kick the gas stove habit that is keeping us from moving off of fossil fuels. So that's what we're going to focus on tonight with this webinar on induction cooking. This is all part of a plan called Beneficial Electrification, which is a way to really reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings and transportation by electrifying our heating, our appliances, our hot water heating, and our transportation. And the benefit this has is that as soon as you do it, you start to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. And then as we green the grid and put more renewables online, this graphic here shows how the emissions go down and down over time. So it's as soon as you electrify your building, you've already made a big jump in greenhouse gas reductions. But then over time, that gets even better as we put more renewables onto the grid. So with that said, I would love to introduce our very first guest, Rupert Spies, if I'm saying that correctly, is a very experienced chef and a teacher from Cornell with 30 years of experience at the hotel school. And Rupert is, we're very lucky to have Rupert in our network. He is married to a member of our Mothers Out Front Tompkins County team, Wendy. And Rupert and Wendy are very excited about helping us to promote induction cooking as a climate solution and as just a really fantastic way to cook. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Rupert to give you a brief presentation on the benefits of induction cooking. Welcome, Rupert.
Okay. I hope all of you can see the PowerPoint slides. As Lisa said, I'm Rupert Spies. If you detect an accent, that's distinctly German. As she said, I taught at the hotel school for 30 years, which is part of Cornell University. And I actually started out my career as a chef. I worked for 10 years in a variety of food service businesses, restaurant and such, ranging from Michelin stars to university food service establishments where we were feeding about 10,000 people a day. As for induction, I have used induction cooking in residential and commercial environments. Okay, okay, here we go. What's happening here?
I can see your second slide now.
Okay.
The one with the cooktop.
Okay. So the first question is, what is induction? In a nutshell, it means you're working or you're heating with induction. That means your pan is heated by an electromagnetic field or current, as opposed to an open flame or heat transfer through surface contact with an electric stove. This is a super cool picture, an infrared picture that shows the two zones that are hot, or the zones that are hot. And when you look at the left side, you can clearly see that there is a lot of heat, especially under the pot. That is a gas cooker. And looking at the right hand, you can see the heat is emitting from the pot, meaning that all the energy is focused on the pot itself. It is very directed. Right. Okay. Guess I have to do it this way. So here are the mechanics of induction. You have an electric supply that goes through a copper coil underneath which an electromagnetic magnet sits. And the electromagnetic field is then absorbed, if you will, or inducted into the heating vessel, be it a pan or be it a pot or whatever, and the ceramic or glass field underneath is no issue in terms of penetration. Here is the actual innards of an induction cooktop, and you can see the coil on the copper coil sitting on top, and underneath is a magnet. So I am a enthusiast as far as working with induction is concerned, and there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, it's very energy efficient. About 85 to 90% of the electric energy that you draw, it goes into the vessel. Now let's compare that to gas. About 35% or so of the energy that is used for cooking goes actually into the vessel. A lot of the air, a lot of the heat goes up into the air. You will have it on the grate, you will have it underneath, you will have it all over the place. You use a standard electric coil or cooktop, and you see that the energy efficiency jumps up quite a bit. It's about 75 to 80%, but you will still heat up a lot of the surrounding areas. You will heat up the glass or ceramic that it sits on top, and it really uses up energy for that. I don't know if you can see the picture on the right-hand side where on the left part of the picture, you see the gas flames leaping up and escaping into the air. On the right-hand side, you can see the induction cooked top with the pot on top, and the energy is really directed at the pot. So when you look at the issues of working with induction, it is really a time saver. And you also save your own energy by it being very efficient, very quick. And because it uses less electric energy in the short run, in the long run, you will certainly save there. It has a very fast heat up time. And that also translates into a reduced cooking time. The temperature control is very immediate. If you see, let's say, a pot boiling and you turn it down, and it will stop boiling immediately. So I have this term underneath which says mise en place, and that's restaurant lingo. And it means everything needs to be in place, which some people say is a little bit of an issue, but I think it's actually really good, because it means that you line up all your pre-prepped ingredients in the order that you need them, so that you don't have to turn the heat down or heat up in your pan or pot, and you can just sip through whatever you're cooking. The temperature control is very precise. On most induction cookers, you actually can set the temperature. So for example, if you would do some frying and the recipe calls for, let's say, 365 degrees Fahrenheit, you set it at that temperature, you let it come up to that temperature, and it doesn't go over, it doesn't overshoot, which is really an issue when you look at electric cooktops, and especially when you're looking at gas. If you want to set it at simmer, for example, 195 degrees or so on, you set it there, it stays there. most newer cooktops are also Bluetooth enabled, which, you know, is quite some convenience. And you can actually, you know, put a pot of water onto the cooktop, walk away, and then say, well, I can start it now and then come into the kitchen 5 or 8 minutes later and then put my spaghetti or whatever in there. Because there are no open flames, the danger of fire or even burns you might get some burns from a very hot induction cooktop where something has sat on top, but compared to electric or especially gas, it's certainly not as much of an issue. What I find very exciting is also that you are really controlling the indoor air quality. Let's say you have gas. When you burn gas, you create carbon monoxide, you create nitrogen oxide, some methane will be escaping, formaldehyde might be produced. If you follow the news or followed the news over the last month or so on, you probably saw some prominent newspapers like the New York Times featuring an article that is based on research that indoor air quality or the effect of indoor air quality through cooking with gas. In the overall scheme of things, not only do you control your indoor air quality, by the way, if you you cook a lot, especially during the summer, you will have to turn your exhaust fans on top speed, which means you draw out a lot of air. And if you have air conditioning, that means you have to have you crank up your air conditioning. So cooking with gas, but also with electric, you certainly create more heat there. I have cleaned gas stoves up and down the wazoo, and it's no fun, to be honest. So looking at the surfaces of induction cooktops, they are just a cinch to clean. And that's really a big benefit. It doesn't, smell up your kitchen or your burning and residue. Here is another picture of induction cooking. On the right-hand side, you see, actually in both pictures, you see pans that have been cut in half. On the right-hand side, you see an egg or half of an egg sitting on a heated up pan, and the egg white has congealed, whereas the egg white that just sits on the induction top itself without the pan doesn't congeal. The same is true for the chocolate being melted that you can see on the left-hand side of the slide. The chocolate and the pan is melting, and whatever sits outside stays the way it is. You can just eat it and pop it into your mouth. So are there cons? Well, yes, there are cons. There might be some challenges. First of all, you have to have the right-sized equipment. If you use equipment that is much too small or too big for your induction cooktop, you may have an issue, but that is really easily overcome. You need to have the appropriate cookware. So it's really important that it's flat bottomed, that it's stainless steel, and that it's either cast iron or enameled cast iron. Copper doesn't work, glass doesn't work. Other types of cooking vessels that you might be able to just pop into your microwave don't work. What is this here? So you can buy induction ranges or burners. If you buy a larger let's say, a range that needs a different power supply, 240 volts, 40 or 50 amperes, and that could be an expensive retrofit. And if you buy the, let's say, if you buy a whole range, it's certainly more expensive than, let's say, electric cooktops, coils, but in the long run, I think it'll pay for itself. I mentioned the learning curve, the mise en place, having everything in place that you get used to how fast it heats and how you need to control it. But I think that's actually more of a positive aspect than really a challenge, because it's not in the long run, it's a short-term issue. Some people complain about fan noise. Well, there is a fan underneath the cooktop to cool the induction unit and cool down the glass. And once that has come down to an appropriate temperature, it stops. I have heard people talking about induction cookers buzzing, but in my experience, that is very often associated with inappropriate equipment, meaning very thin bottomed or not very flat. So that can be overcome. If you are wearing or planning or having to have, I should say, pacemaker, I would check with a cardiologist and see whether they are of a certain category, because certain pacemakers are not as compatible or with with induction cooking. So my take, as I said already, I'm very positive about induction cooking because it's fast, it's easy to control, it's very precise, it goes quickly. And energy efficiency really translates into energy savings. I mentioned the indoor air quality improvement if you have induction cooktop, especially compared to gas. And the greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced if you use electricity or if you use induction cooking, especially if you switch over to renewable energy. Some people complain about the expenses of induction cooking or induction cookers, but if you buy a countertop version, be it a 1 or 2 element unit, they are actually quite affordable. If you go online and look for it, it's probably in the range of $50 to $60 for a single, and maybe $120 or so for a double unit. And the positive thing is that you can plug it into a regular outlet. You don't need to have a 240 volt, 40 ampere power supply. So all in all, I am very excited about working with it. I have, the first time I used induction was actually, hate to say it, in the 90s, early 90s. So it's a great way of cooking and working and having fun in the kitchen. As you can see, I'm not into food, into cooking. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions and a later segment. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rupert. And there's some great questions coming in. I'm going to launch a poll to see how people are cooking now who are joining this. So feel free, it's an anonymous poll, to answer that in the next few seconds while I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again to introduce our next guest, who is Sasha Bernstein Skon, who I got the pleasure of meeting a was it last year, Sasha, on another induction cooking webinar. Sasha is a sustainable food consultant and a fishmonger. She lives in Westchester, where I grew up as a kid, in Tarrytown. And she's a volunteer with the Mothers Out Front River Towns team. I sent out an email attributing her to the Northern Westchester team incorrectly. So I want to publicly apologize and say that Sasha is a member of the River Towns team of Mothers Out Front. So I'm so excited to turn this over to Sasha, who is going to make a delicious St. Patty's Day meal for us with Guinness battered pollock. And we did send out the recipe, but if you didn't get it, let me know. I can also post it in the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing again. I'm going to end this poll. So I'm going to share the results of the poll. So we have 21% of you already cooking on induction. Amazing. 44% gas. 33% electric, not induction, and then 3% of us who have gas and a portable induction cooktop and are using both. So that's really good to know. And maybe those of you who already cook on induction will want to share your experiences with that with the rest of us. Okay, so terrific. And I am now going to turn it over to Sasha for the cooking demo. So Sasha, take it away. I'm going to spotlight you. There we go.
Hi. I'm sort of standing just like my picture. Hi. I'm Sasha, as Lisa said, and I am a member of the River Tower, a volunteer for Mothers Out Front River Towns. I'm also a fishmonger, and my family's been in the business for generations down in Fulton Fish Market. So I'm generation 4, and I have a cousin who's generation 5, and I've worked in food pretty much my whole adult life, not just in fish, a few kitchens, some PR, some events, working with chefs, cookbooks, all kinds of things. So I also am a big food person, and also was not sure about induction when I first started learning about it, because it had kind of been drilled into my head from all these cooking professionals that gas is the way to go. And I have really come to love my induction, my portable induction cooktop, which is, I'm in that camp that still has a gas stove, and I also use this. But we're hoping to redo our kitchen this summer and move over to induction. But this is a good option in the meantime. So I'm gonna get started. What I love about this that Rupert mentioned is for frying, which I don't do a ton of, which means I'm not really an expert. And when I do it, I wanna make sure I do it right. So I can set this to exactly the temperature I want, which is pretty amazing. I can't do that on my gas stove. So I would definitely do that here. And I'm just putting in a neutral vegetable oil here and some olive oil, just a blend to kind of get that going. It'll heat up really quick, but the batter won't take very long either. So this is pollock. It's in the cod family. This comes from Massachusetts. It's a good, sustainable, generally pretty affordable, white crowd pleaser, simple fish. I think in Great Britain and Ireland, it's sometimes called coley. Since we're doing St. Patty's, thought I'd mention that. And I have some string beans because those are kind of fun to batter and fry too. Not everyone eats fish. So I'm going to start with an egg. Just crack that in here. And I think it's a teaspoon of salt, some cracks of black pepper. This is a teaspoon of baking powder that I just pre-measured. This is my mise en place that Rupert mentioned. And mix that together. I actually didn't end up getting Guinness. I have this hard cider that I love. It's my favorite abandoned hard cider. Happens to be owned by my brother. I'm not biased at all. And I have this other really nice beer and it's green. So I'm gonna use this one because why not be festive? And the recipe says 2 cups. I might do just a little less because I'm not going to do I'm not going to fully cook 4 portions worth of fish right now. It says to use enough flour till it thickens. It ends up being a little over a cup. So that was a cup right there that I measured out. You can see this kind of starting to get pretty frothy and bubbly there. I'm going to go ahead and do a bit more. Probably about a cup and a half. And there it's starting to thicken. It's kind of like pancake batter. Okay. So that's that. Put this off to the side. Now, cheers to St. Patrick's Day. Okay, it's good. Hadn't tried that one before. All right, so I'm gonna also season my fish a little bit. Just a little bit of salt. By the way, you could just cook this without the battering and frying, obviously. That's how I usually cook fish, just in a pan with a little olive oil and salt and a squeeze of lemon at the end. We just thought it'd be fun to show off the temperature feature here. So I have it at 350. You could really go to 360 or 365, as Rupert mentioned. My this particular model does not go between 350 and 375. But if you had one in your home, they usually go to all the increments. You could select any temperature. So this heats up pretty fast, as I said. We're gonna do a tester. What do you think? Think it's ready, guys? Let's get a little bit. I think it's ready. All right. So we're gonna set this one in. It's gonna be a couple minutes aside. It'll end up being about 2 to 3 minutes per side for the fish. And I just had it drying here on a kitchen towel that I used for this kind of thing, just because if the fish is dry, it'll adhere better to the batter. You can use a paper towel. I try not to. And just use a kitchen towel and then wash it. But that would totally work too. This is almost ready to go. Start to see the browning on the edges. I don't know if there's, if anyone has questions, Lisa, I don't know if, you feel free to interrupt me at any point. I can't quite read them from here, but.
I just shared the link to the recipe in the chat. Somebody wanted to know how you clean the cooktop. I know you were going to talk about that later, and I know Rupert mentioned it. Oh, someone just
my favorite part.
Viola just said, thank you, Sasha, for not using disposable paper towels. You have a fan.
Oh. It's, you know, gotta do the little things that you can.
Amari says, I first started cooking on glass cooktops while living in London, starting back in 1999. Up to then, I had only experienced gas ranges. Ended up loving my glass top range. Found that glass top cleaner works just fine with the scrubber made for this. Even at Thanksgiving, when a friend visiting from the US burned some sugar on it. Yikes. Important to right after the top cools. Yeah, and the top cools quickly. It doesn't get that hot, even when I've been cooking on the induction. Unlike the conventional electric stove that stays hot a really long time and can burn you, the induction, it does get warm, but it doesn't, the burner doesn't get super hot because mostly it's the pan that's hot. Oh, wow. So many people who are such a fan of you not using the paper towel.
Oh, good. Let's start a club, everyone.
Wondering why we can't hear it sizzling. Is it not sizzling? Or we just
It is sizzling. Should I bring you closer? The fan is on. Hold on. Sorry. Can you hear it? Can you hear the sizzle?
Oh, yes. You can hear it a
Okay.
bit more that way. Yeah. So it does sizzle.
It sizzles. It sizzles. And I should say this is a recipe from Sandy Ingvar of Grand Central Oyster in New York City, famous seafood place. It's not my recipe. Also not my specialty to fry fish, but I have to say it's really fun doing on this cooktop because also, you know how like frying can kind of like get all over and then you have to like take the things off to clean the whole underneath. And as you guys were just saying, this is not that situation. It's so easy. Just like, whoop, there goes, all the oil is gone. It's like the fry didn't even happen, except it's delicious and you can eat it. Okay, so.
That looks so good. You're making me really hungry right now.
I had to eat beforehand so that I have 2 young kids. They're 3 and 5. So we eat very early. I might have to have a second dinner because, fried doesn't really keep very well.
No, although I did find out from my kids that you can reheat fried stuff in the air fryer.
Oh.
And it's much better than, other methods of reheating. So Sasha is using a portable induction single burner cooktop. I have one too from IKEA. It cost about $50. Sasha's might be a slightly fancier, more expensive model than mine. And this is a great option for a lot of people who either don't have the electrical service for a full induction or aren't just ready to swap out their gas yet. Like for me and for Sasha, it's not just a simple swap, but involves a kitchen remodel that I'm not quite ready to do. So I just have that portable plugged in on the counter, and I mostly use that. I occasionally use the gas stove, but mostly I'm using the portable cooktop like Sasha's demonstrating here. And in my house, I especially appreciate that in the summer when it gets really hot in the kitchen and the induction doesn't heat that up. So yes, Tracy, I'm not sure. We'll get to that question. That's a great question. I see your question. Go ahead, Sasha.
So I just pulled everything off. It's pretty much done. I turned this off and you can sort of see that it's, the handle is actually not even hot. This is pretty much immediately, it's still bubbling a little bit, but it immediately starts to cool. And there's no risk of none of the residual. There's like a bunch of like little bits of batter and stuff in here. None of that's going to burn because now there's no more heat source whatsoever. I'm just going to continue the demo. I'm just going to make a quick little sauce for this. You could do a whole tartar sauce with pickles and aromatics and herbs. And I'm just going to do a little mayo and lemon just for ease because I'm in that mood to just have it be easy. So I'm just going to mix it up. And that's just kind of like a nice complement, a little tart creaminess to complement the salty, crunchy. And just can be whatever consistency seems good to you. And that's pretty much it. Have a string bean. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Cheers, Sasha. And I will reveal that I am also drinking a cider, an upstate New York cider. I forgot, which is your brother's cidery?
He's, shameless plug, Abandoned Hard Cider in upstate New York.
Yes, I'm drinking the 1911, which is one of our favorites. But there's so many good cideries now. And what's the name of your website, Sasha?
It's called sashasseafood.com.
SashaSeafood.com. I'll put the link in the chat. Sasha,
Sasha's with like S and then another S, possessive. Sasha's. There's a lot of S's going on.
all right. Well, that is fantastic. Thank you so much for that demo.
Thank you.
So now we're just going to
Should I just quickly show the cleanup?
Yes, please do. Go ahead.
So this is pretty much it. I mean, nothing really even spattered out of it because it was such a controlled heat, but just any random towel. I mean, if you can also do like the glass cleaner for like a bigger mess and a more deep cleaning, but there was hardly anything there. So we're good to go.
Okay, great. Well, Sasha and Rupert, we have some questions for you. And so I'm gonna, let's see, I have you spotlighted. How can I unspotlight you? Maybe I'll just, oh, remove spotlight. That works. There we go. So we have a whole bunch of questions. One question is, does anybody know what the energy use of induction is compared to a microwave? And I will say that probably our food enthusiasts and chefs might shudder slightly at the mention of a microwave, but it's a good question and I don't know the answer. Do you guys know the answer?
Well, let me just say one thing about microwave. So you really can't put large pieces of food into the microwave unless you have, let's say, a turbo chef or something like that. Very often the penetration depth, meaning how deep the microwaves go, is maybe 2 to 3 inches. Anything that goes beyond that might be a problem. And then there's also some uneven cooking. That's why when you're working with a microwave, very often recipes overstate how long you should be cooking it because that takes care of the uneven cooking. As far as the energy usage is concerned, I mean, you have, let's say 1200 watts or something like that. Whereas if you're looking at a cooktop, let's say portable cooktop, maybe 1800 watts or something like that. And then you go to induction ranges, you're up in a 3600 watt range or so on. Obviously, you would be using more energy, but then there is this trade-off in terms of what you can cook, how much you can cook, and all that. So I don't think there's this very straight answer to that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer either. So that's maybe a research question. So there's a lot of Lisas on tonight. One wants to know, Sasha, is that a cast iron pan you're using?
It is. This is a stove. I also have a Le Creuset that both work on here. I just do the old fashioned try to stick a magnet to it trick. And if it sticks, I'm like, that'll work with my induction burner cooker. So yeah, it works pretty well.
And another Lisa wants to know the name brand of your induction cooktop.
This one, that's a good question. Oh, Burton, Burton.
Great. And I have one just from IKEA, which I got on sale. So it's normally $50 and I think I got it for 45. Barbara Eden wants to know that they dry out their cast iron pans after washing them on the burner, and can you do that on the induction burner? Which I said, yes, we do that. As the burner will run as long as the pan is on it. If you take the pan off the burner, it won't work anymore because it only works by that interaction between the magnet and the pan. So when you take it off, mine gets kind of annoyed and starts to beep at you, but you can wash it and then stick it back on there and turn it back on with nothing in it. It'll dry it off just fine. Yes,
So
Barbara, there are brands that are about close to $1,000. The Frigidaire one that is available at Lowe's, depending on whether you get it on sale or not, is usually between like $999 and $1,200. and Thayer has some in that price range, I know, in Ithaca. Sorry, go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, so I'm just picking random questions here. I see Elizabeth's question saying that I'm a renter in New York City. Our kitchens have no fans. Can I use induction? Yes, yes, yes. Let me tell you that restaurants are switching over to induction. A local restaurateur who I had a conversation with last year said that they put induction in there and they saved a lot of money by not having to put expensive exhaust fans in there. And these exhaust fans in kitchens require ANSEL system, which is a fire suppression system, and that goes into the tens of thousands of dollars, even if it's, let's say, not a very large kitchen. So they do that. It's very easy. You will also find it like on buffets, let's say breakfast buffet, they make an omelet for you or something like that. Way to go, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, I mean, any kind of cooking, there is going to be maybe some, you know, could be fat particulates from the pan you don't want to breathe. But as far as the other emissions from a gas stove that are unhealthful, like from the gas flame itself, it's really so much safer to cook on induction. And by the way, if you are cooking with gas, it's really important to turn that hood vent on, and hopefully you have a real vent that actually vents outside. If you don't, you might want to really think about turning on a regular fan every time you cook or opening a window, because ventilation is just really, really important. And there's more and more evidence for about the health impacts of cooking over gas. I remember years ago when we first got this house, I had a home energy audit, and the auditor's main thing he told me was never ever cook without the vent fan on all the way. So just a little FYI, since it's not, most of us can't switch our stove overnight to something else. So it's good to know what the safest thing to do is. Someone asked if they turn on and off like a regular electric stove, and I said they don't, but I did get a message from Marie, thank you Marie, that says they do turn off and on at the lower power setting. I haven't experienced that. Have you, Sasha or Rupert?
You know, when I go back to Germany, hang out with my sister, and she has actually a combination of two cooktop elements and two electric. And if you're, just taking it off, putting it on and things like that, it gets a little impatient. And it sort of sends you a message. It's like, okay, don't make me nervous here, meaning you have to either keep the vessel on or take it off. If you just do it for a very short period of time, it works, but it's certainly a good idea to leave the vessel on, like the pan, and stir it instead of like flipping it and lifting it up every 5 seconds like you do, or I do when I do work on gas tops.
Yeah. Erica wants to know, can you easily buy an induction stove or full tabletop? I'm not sure what tabletop you mean, but, or are they often on back order? The popular, well-rated brands of induction stoves right now, everyone is on back order. To my knowledge, people are telling me it's taking them at least 3 months from ordering to getting the stove that they want. So you do want to plan ahead. Part of that is the COVID, backlog of pretty much everything, the supply chain issues we're all experiencing, and the new popularity of induction. As far as I know, the portable cooktops are still pretty easy to get. Does anybody know about that? I haven't bought one in a while, but
yeah, no, you go online, you can find the induction cooktops, and you get them like from Amazon a day or
yeah, Amazon had quite a few last time I looked, and I think sometimes Aldi sells them. There's a bunch of places where you can buy these single burners. Oh, somebody had a very good question about canning. And I've also heard that canning can be a problem on an induction cooktop because of the big giant pot and how heavy it is. Any, Rupert, do you know anything about that, or Sasha?
Well, I think, right sizing the equipment. If you really have a big pot that goes very much over the diameter, then it could be an issue, I think. But if you have the appropriate size pot, I wouldn't expect much of an issue or an issue at all.
Yeah, somebody told me that an appliance store locally told them if they do canning, they can't get induction. And I wanted to look into that. And someone asked that again tonight. I know that on my single burner, one of my pots is my big, huge pasta pot. Like when I made the corned beef and cabbage for St. Patrick's Day, I brought it to a boil because it cooks for like 4 hours on the gas, because it's such a big pot, and that one burner doesn't have a big range, isn't sort of wide enough. And then I let it simmer on the induction for the 4 hours. So I took, a few minutes to let it bring to a boil on the gas, because that range my little countertop one doesn't do great with that pot to, initially. But, that's one of the things when you start to shop for these things, and there's some shopping guides for these. Yale University Climate put out one, and there's quite a few different things out there, Consumer Reports, etc. So the higher priced ones are the ones where you can kind of like, they have a huge range of sizes, like where 2 burners can combine electronically together into one huge burner if you need that for like a big griddle or something, so that you can do a lot of super fancy things on those higher end things. And for the basic stove, it's more like the regular 4 burners, 1 bigger one and 3 small ones or whatever. People are asking about ovens. So Rupert, do you want to take that? Obviously, there's no such thing as an induction oven.
Well, if you buy an induction range, I don't think you're I think you're hard pressed to find something that doesn't have what's called forced air convection, meaning it has a fan in the back. And because of that, it's very energy efficient. It heats up very quickly. I mean, I worked with forced air convection ovens throughout my career, and they are phenomenal in terms of heat up time, in terms of distribution. You can put several trays into the oven. One thing that you should keep in mind is that because of the forced air convection, you actually should reduce the cooking time and the temperature. Let's say the recipe says 375. You certainly can go down to 350. And you can also reduce the cooking time, usually by up to 10% or so.
Yeah. And then a lot of people, I've seen some like top chefs talking about like commercial cooking and very high-end cooking with and talking about sous vide. And I don't really know what sous vide is, but maybe you want to tell us. I do know it's process, but I'm not sure what sous vide is.
Happy to talk about it. It's the French term meaning without air. So you take a plastic or a vacuum capable plastic bag, put your food in there, draw a vacuum, seal it completely, immerse the food into a water bath set at a particular temperature. As I mentioned, I think I said something about the steak. If you want it rare, let's say 120 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that, you cook it for a certain amount of time. There are actually apps. I happen to have immersion circulator, it's called. And I set the temperature, let's say 135 for, let's say, particular types of food. Let it sit in there for a good number of hours so that A, it cooks fully, B, the microorganisms are completely destroyed. And if you add some additional time to it, that makes the food, let's say the meats, more tender. You can take inexpensive cuts of beef, for example, put them in there and cook them, add some extra time for tenderization, and it's fork tender. It's fabulous.
So I know all of our guests who are very glad that Sasha didn't use a paper towel will want to know, can you do sous vide without plastic?
No, as far as I know, you can't.
These are reusable silicone
I
things.
was
You
just
can,
wondering that. And
I
reusable.
looked it up myself because I thought sous vide, that sounds awesome. Plastic, I hate plastic. So I think there are some silicone sous vide
Yeah, I mean,
things.
what you really have to do is draw the vacuum, and you can do that by immersing it into a pot with water so that all the air is being pushed out, and then you seal it at the top very tightly. You know, if there's a little bit of air in there, that's probably not that much of an issue. But if there's too much, then the cooking is uneven, and then you also have to be concerned about microbial load not being reduced appropriately.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, Rupert is training people going into the restaurant business who are responsible for the health and safety of hundreds or thousands of guests, and that's very, very important. At home, we can poison ourselves if we choose to. Well, I wanted to run another poll real quick to find out how you enjoyed this webinar. So feel free to take the poll while we wrap up here with our final questions. And I do want to thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We have some upcoming webinars coming. We have, in 2 weeks, we have a Heat Pumps 101 with Push for Clean Heat in Buffalo and the Clean Heat and Cool of Brooklyn program, bottom lining that. And you can see our whole webinar schedule. All right, so the poll results are in, and it looks like we did pretty well, guys. About more than half of you loved it, and a third of you liked it, and we've got only one participant who wants their hour back. So I say we did well, and thank you for that feedback. So it's 8 o'clock, and I don't want to keep people over time. I will linger around if people want to chat, but I just want to say thanks so much to our wonderful guests, Rupert and Sasha. It's been a pleasure having you, and I just so appreciate you taking the time this evening. And thanks to all of our guests for joining us as well. And keep an eye out for the rest of our webinar series, and we hope you'll join us and tell your friends. The recording for this will be available at the Renewable Heat Now YouTube channel, and it was also live streamed on Facebook. So you can share it from the Renewable Heat Now Facebook page if you'd like. So have a lovely evening and happy St. Paddy's Day.